The moment I stepped through the doorway, my daughter-in-law's scream hit me like a slap in the face. There she was again. "I told you already I don't want that old woman here." My name is Emily, 68 years old, semi-retired after decades of running my own event planning company. What she didn't know was that this house and their entire lavish lifestyle existed because of my signature. The noon sun poured over the front yard, the very same garden I had paid a landscape architect to design just 6 months earlier. In my hands was a heavy porcelain tray, still warm, covered with an embroidered linen cloth. Inside was my signature dish roast pork with plum sauce, the one my son Ethan had loved since he was a little boy, running barefoot through the halls of our old family home. I froze in the doorway to the living room. My hands, spotted with age but steady from years of labor, didn't tremble, though my heart tightened painfully. I was 5 minutes early for our Sunday lunch. I had always been punctual. My father used to say being on time was the courtesy of decent people, and I made it the golden rule of my company. For 40 years, I had served governors, organized weddings for the elite, and managed kitchen crises with the composure of a general. I wasn't the kind of old woman who sat knitting while waiting for life to pass. I was the kind who built an entire career from a tiny kitchen with 2 gas burners. But as I stood before the oak door of my son's home, I suddenly felt small, as if every achievement had vanished beneath the scorn of a 30-year-old woman who'd never washed a single plate in her life. "I can't stand her, Ethan." Madison's sharp voice echoed from inside. "Always lecturing me with those old-fashioned morals, judging every speck of dust, bringing greasy food. I just want a peaceful Sunday. I don't want her here, breathing the same air as me." A heavy silence followed. I waited for my son's voice, for a word of defense, something like, "Don't say that, she's my mother." But all I heard was his weak reply, "Keep your voice down, honey. Mom's coming. It's just lunch, try to get through it." His pleading tone, from the same son who once spoke with confidence, made my blood run cold. I adjusted my glasses, smoothed my silk dress, and took a deep breath. The scent of jasmine perfume mixed with the bitter smell of betrayal. I decided right then that they would not see me cry. I wouldn't turn around and leave. I would walk in, head held high, my dignity intact. Because this house, though they believed it was theirs, stood on the foundation I built with my savings and my generosity. I pushed open the door and entered with the practiced smile I had perfected over the years, a steel smile, the same one I'd used to handle demanding clients and dishonest suppliers. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said cheerfully, pretending I hadn't heard a word of the venom that had just filled the air. "It's scorching out there. But I brought your favorite dish, Ethan." The living room looked like a scene from a cheap movie. Madison stood beside a gleaming white leather sofa, her face flushed, arms crossed. When she saw me, her eyes widened, then narrowed with barely concealed hatred. She smoothed the skirt of her designer dress, no doubt a weekend purchase, and forced out a brittle smile. "Oh, Mrs. Emily, what a surprise," she said, her sweet tone laced with poison. "I thought you were resting today. You looked so tired last week." "Tired? Not at all, dear," I replied, placing the tray on the glass dining table. "At my age, rest comes after I'm in the ground. Besides, I couldn't let Ethan miss his favorite meal." Ethan stood there pale-faced, avoiding my gaze, fiddling with his keys. He stepped forward, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, a cold, perfunctory gesture. "Hi, Mom. Thanks for coming," he mumbled, glancing at his wife as if seeking permission to speak to his own mother. We sat down at the table. The air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Madison poured water with sharp, exaggerated movements, the glasses clinking together. I looked around abstract paintings, velvet curtains, a crystal chandelier. All of it came from my hard work. When they married 5 years ago, Madison insisted on living in this upscale neighborhood. Ethan had just started his career as an architect and didn't yet have the credit. I was the one who placed the down payment, the one who co-signed the loan. I even gave them a company credit card for necessary expenses. "So, what have you been up to this week, Mrs. Emily?" Madison asked with a mocking smile as she speared a piece of meat. "Watching TV? Gossiping at church with your old friends? Must be boring, not having anything useful to do." I recognized the jab. She knew perfectly well I still served on the neighborhood board and mentored young entrepreneurs, but she wanted me to feel irrelevant. "Not exactly, Madison," I said calmly, dabbing my mouth with a cloth napkin. "I reviewed some financial reports. Numbers never lie and they never betray." Madison let out a sharp laugh. "You should relax and let us live our own lives. You still think you can boss us around, just because, well, you know." "Because what?" I asked, meeting her eyes. "Because you're Ethan's mother," she replied, stepping back slightly before regaining her composure. "But he's an adult now, he has his own family, you're just a guest, and sometimes too many visits can be exhausting." Ethan choked on his water. "Madison, stop it." "What?" "I'm just being honest. I'm tired of pretending. Your mother acts like she owns the place, bringing food like I can't cook, judging everything she sees. I need my space. She needs to know her place." The truth hung in the air, ugly, bare, and final. It wasn't just dislike. She saw me as an obstacle to her fragile little kingdom of luxury. She hated that I knew Ethan didn't make enough to sustain it. I stayed silent, chewing the meat that now tasted like ash. "I understand," I said softly, my voice unnervingly steady. "You're right, Madison. Maybe I come by too often. You two need independence." Madison's eyes brightened, thinking she had won. "Exactly," she replied, her tone sweetening with false relief. "It's not that we don't love you. It's just that young couples need privacy. You've lived your life, let us live ours." "Yes, Mom," Ethan added, still not looking at me. "Maybe we could see each other once a month, at a restaurant or something." That sentence tore through the last threads of my patience. My son was throwing me out of the house I paid for, just to appease the woman who treated him like an ATM. I smiled politely and excused myself to wash my hands. As I walked down the hallway lined with photos from their European vacations all paid for with the emergency card, I entered the bathroom, locked the door, and looked into the mirror. The face staring back was lined with age, hair pinned neatly in a silver bun, but the eyes were sharp, burning with the same fire that had carried me through my first denied loan. It was the gaze of a woman ready for battle. I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and navigated to the credit card section. There it was, the supplemental card in Madison's name. The spending was obscene. Clothes, spas, restaurants, jewelry, all charged to me, paid automatically from my pension and rental income. I had let it slide for years, wanting my son to be happy, afraid of being labeled stingy, hoping they'd grow up. But when I heard, "I don't want that old woman here," something inside me snapped. And when something breaks, you either discard it or repair it. I wasn't one to discard, but I certainly didn't keep rewarding entitlement. I checked the latest transaction. $5,000 spent at a luxury salon yesterday. A cold smile spread across my face. My heartbeat steadied like an engine coming to life. The pain was gone, replaced by clarity. They wanted independence. They wanted me to know my place. Fine. I would show them exactly what that place was and who really owned the ground they stood on. I didn't cancel the card right then. I never acted impulsively. It was Sunday. The bank was closed. I needed precision. One clean strike. I washed my hands with vanilla soap, reapplied my terracotta lipstick, and returned to the table. Madison and Ethan stopped whispering when they saw me. They looked relieved, victorious. "The roast is delicious, Mom," Ethan said awkwardly. "I'm glad you like it," I replied softly, too softly. "And you're right, Madison," I continued. "I was thinking in the bathroom and realized you're both right. You should live your own lives on your own dime. I'll step back, focus on myself, maybe reorganize my finances. You know, old lady stuff." "That sounds perfect," Madison said, not catching the word finances. We finished lunch in silence. I helped clear the table, though Madison insisted the maid, whom I also paid for indirectly, would handle it on Monday. I said goodbye at the door. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm golden glow over the house. I looked at the facade, assessing its condition and value. A solid investment, I thought. "See you soon," I said. "Yeah, whenever," Madison replied, waving dismissively. All right, sweetheart, take care, I smiled. I got into my gray sedan, simple, strong, reliable, and drove slowly out of the gated community. The security guard at the gate greeted me by name, with more respect than my son had shown in years. On the road home, it was just me and my resolve. Sunday was ending. Monday was coming, the day the real world turned. Monday was when offices opened, signatures were processed, and supply lines were cut. They wanted the old woman gone. What they didn't realize was that the old woman was the backbone of the world they lived in. When I got home, I slipped off my shoes and brewed a cup of hot tea. Sitting in my favorite armchair, I looked at the clock. 14 hours until the bank opened. 14 hours before Madison discovered her black card was nothing more than a piece of plastic. 14 hours before reality came knocking, and this time it wouldn't be bringing roast pork. I smiled faintly as the steam curled up from my cup. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but justice is always served on a Monday morning. The next morning was unnervingly clear, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. I woke at 5 a.m., just as I had for 40 years. My body kept its own time, unaware of retirement, unfamiliar with self-pity, and utterly intolerant of insolence. While the city still slept, I brewed my coffee black, no sugar bitter, as the truth that awaited. I no longer went to the office every day. The company's day-to-day operations were handled by my general manager, and I only stepped in when my signature was needed. Instead, I entered my study, the room my children once called the bunker. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my hands on the mahogany desk. That desk had seen me cry when my husband died, laugh when I landed my first government contract, and calculate payroll through sleepless nights so I wouldn't have to lay anyone off during hard times. Now, it would witness a family audit. In front of me was a neatly labeled stack of files, as organized as a military dossier. I took the one marked Ethan's household and opened it. The scent of old paper mingled with coffee. As I reviewed the detailed statements, I saw more than financial exploitation. I saw a written record of my own blindness. It wasn't just the credit card. I logged into my bank account and began adding it up. Their health insurance paid by me, the insurance on Ethan's truck and Madison's SUV paid by me, the property taxes, the HOA fees, even the paycheck of the guard who greeted them each morning, all of it, paid from my pocket. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air, but from the cold precision of numbers. Over the past 5 years, I had poured out a small fortune to keep that illusion alive. Madison wasn't just living in a house she could never afford, she was living an entire life she didn't deserve. I looked at the most recent charges: $4,500 at a spa, $8,200 at a boutique, $3,800 at a luxury steakhouse. The last transaction happened the very same day. She claimed she was too tired to call me. But the real treasure lay deeper in the safe, hidden behind a framed landscape painting. I turned the combination the day my father was born. The lock clicked softly. Inside, I pulled out a dark blue leather folder. Inside was a notarized folder labeled Contract Number 45890. My fingers brushed the paper. It had been a long time since I'd read it. I remembered the day I signed it at the law office, Ethan so thrilled he barely skimmed the details. Following my old lawyer's advice, I had purchased the house in a very particular way. Full ownership remained in my name. Ethan only held a temporary occupancy lease, renewed annually. And clause number 7, written in small but legally binding print, stated clearly, the owner reserves the right to terminate this agreement at any time if the occupant violates principles of morality, respect, or causes damage to the property. I smiled a sad but powerful smile. Respect. Would yelling, "I don't want that old woman here," count as disrespect? I believed it would. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, sat down in my reading chair, the folder resting on my lap. I closed my eyes and let myself feel the weight of the years. How had I ended up here? When did the woman who used to bargain for wholesale meat at 4 a.m. become the old lady treated like a burden? I remembered my hands 30 years ago, burned by oil, nails chipped, skin cracked from industrial soap. I remembered Ethan as a boy, sitting on a soda crate while I cooked for 300 wedding guests. I had worked so that he'd never have to live like that, so he could study, build a name, have a clean shirt and smooth hands. And I succeeded. He became an architect. But somewhere along the way, I erased from his mind what effort truly meant. I had deprived him of understanding that money doesn't grow on trees, it comes from sweat. As for Madison, she was another story. When she looked at me, she saw only wrinkles, silver hair, low heels. She thought my life revolved around church services and television dramas. She had no idea that just last week I'd signed a catering contract for 3 new industrial cafeterias. She didn't know I managed an investment portfolio that would make her own father blush. To her, I was nothing more than an antique with a checkbook. That contempt, I suddenly realized, was my greatest advantage. They thought I was weak because I was old, foolish because I was generous, dependent because I sought affection. How pitiful. They didn't understand that the patience of a woman who built an empire was not weakness, it was strategy. I endured not because I couldn't react, but because I hoped they would grow up. But as my grandmother used to say, if there's no seed, nothing will ever grow. I stood and walked toward the tall mirror in my study. The woman reflected there was no longer the one who had felt humiliated yesterday. I saw an owner. A mother ready to administer the bitter medicine that saves the patient. "It's over, Emily," I said out loud. My voice was firm, resonant in the empty room. "The era of handouts is over. The 5-star hotel is closed. Welcome to real life." I turned back to my desk. It was time to make a plan. This couldn't just be anger, it had to be a lesson. If I cut them off all at once, they'd play the victims. They'd tell everyone the old woman had lost her mind. I needed a precise strike, subtle, deliberate, forcing them to face reality where it hurt most, their comfort and their pride. I took a blank sheet of paper, uncapped my fountain pen, and began a list. 1. Supplemental credit card cancel immediately. 2. Cleaning and gardening services stop payment. 3. Luxury utilities, premium cable, high-speed internet, club memberships cancel or transfer contracts to their name. 4. The final blow the house. Review the lease agreement. The landline rang. It was my assistant, Lucia, who had worked by my side for 15 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Emily. Are you coming to the office today? We need your signature for the dairy supplier contract." "Good morning, Lucia," I replied, my tone oddly light. "I'll come by later, but first I need a favor." "Yes, ma'am." "Call the bank and ask for Robert, the private account manager. Tell him I want to cancel a supplemental card ending in 4509. "Madison's card?" Lucia asked, her voice knowing. "Should I report it lost?" "No," I said slowly, savoring each word. "It's not lost. Just tell them the primary account holder decided to revoke the authorization, no reason required." "Understood, ma'am. Anything else?" "Yes. Call the staffing company. Inform them that as of today, services at 432 Maple Street will no longer be billed to me. If the residents wish to keep them, they'll have to sign and pay on their own." There was a brief silence on the line. Lucia was always discreet, but she understood everything. "Are you all right, Mrs. Emily?" she asked softly. "Never better, Lucia. Just doing some spring cleaning, dusting off the old cobwebs." "Wonderful, ma'am. I'll handle it right away." I hung up and checked the clock. 9:15. Madison usually went to the gym around 10, then stopped by the coffee shop for her almond milk hazelnut latte, an indulgence that cost nearly $6 and went on my bill every day. Today, that latte would taste different. When she handed over her card, the reader would beep that unpleasant beep of a declined transaction, but that was only the beginning. My mind clicked into gear like a well-oiled machine. I remembered Ethan had a dinner scheduled with his business partners on Wednesday, an annual event I always sponsored with a full buffet. This year, the phone would stay silent. I felt powerful not with the power of revenge, but of reclaimed self-respect, the power to say no. For years, my yes had been so cheap it lost its meaning. Now, my no would be worth a fortune. I reopened the house file. The lease was set to auto-renew next month. How convenient. If I gave 30 days' notice, I could alter the terms. I wouldn't evict them. I was still a mother. But I would start charging rent at market rate. In this neighborhood, a house like that easily rents for about $60,000 a year. Did Ethan have that kind of money to spare? Of course not. Reality is a merciless mirror, and I was about to hold it right in front of them. I stood up, ready to leave and begin the next phase of my plan. I chose my navy suit, my favorite pearl necklace, and a pair of modest but elegant heels. I applied my makeup carefully, erasing the traces of a sleepless night. When I stepped outside, the morning sun bathed the street in gold. I glanced at my phone before starting the car. No calls. No messages. Naturally. On Monday mornings, the old lady didn't exist until they needed something. I drove straight to the bank. Although Lucia had already called, I wanted to sign the termination papers myself. I wanted to see the branch manager's face when I declared that my generosity had officially gone bankrupt. The cool air conditioning greeted me as I walked through the lobby. Robert, the branch director, immediately stood to welcome me. "Mrs. Emily, what a pleasure to see you. Please, come in. Coffee?" "Just water, thank you, Robert," I said, taking a seat across the glass desk. "Lucia called earlier. We've already locked the supplemental card. Was there a security issue?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled faintly. "No, Robert. Let's call it a performance issue." "Performance?" He frowned slightly. "That investment hasn't produced the expected return on gratitude or respect, and as you know in business, when an asset turns toxic, you liquidate it." Robert nodded, a bit confused, but he didn't need to understand just to execute. "The card has been canceled. Any other changes?" "Yes," I said, pulling a folded list from my purse. "I want to review all automatic payments. Today we clean house. My personal account should reflect only my personal expenses." We spent over an hour going through it all, canceling insurance policies, ending service payments, terminating subscriptions. Each click of Robert's mouse snapped another chain that had been binding me. I felt lighter, freer. As I stepped out of the bank, my phone buzzed. A notification from the banking app. Transaction declined at Starbucks reason. Card locked. I stared at the screen and burst out laughing right there on the sidewalk. People turned to look, but I didn't care. 10:30 a.m. The first hit landed perfectly. The quiet war had begun, and the enemy had just realized they were out of ammunition. I tucked my phone away and walked toward my car with the stride of someone in full control. It was a good day to be Emily. Back at the company office, the phone on my desk buzzed like a trapped insect, Ethan's name flashing on the display. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, not out of cruelty, but out of principle. Years of motherhood and management had taught me that silence can teach more than 1,000 words, especially to those who've grown used to instant responses at every snap of their fingers. I was in the main office of Royal Banquets, surrounded by the aroma of roasted coffee and quiet success. Through the glass wall, I watched my employees move with practiced grace, hauling produce crates, checking linens, confirming delivery routes. It was my world, one of order, effort, and results. A world Madison would never understand because she believed money simply appeared in a bank account like mushrooms after rain. I took a sip of chamomile tea, letting the warmth calm my throat. The phone vibrated again, an unknown number. Probably the store manager where her card had been declined. I could almost picture Madison in her designer workout clothes, sunglasses on her head, throwing a tantrum at the counter while people waited in line behind her. Public embarrassment, a harsh but effective teacher. When the call ended and the voicemail light blinked, I knew it was time for phase 2. I pressed the intercom. "Lucia, if my son calls, transfer him to me, but not immediately. Tell him I'm in a meeting with the seafood supplier and might not be available. Let him wait 3 minutes." "Understood, Mrs. Emily," she said in her perfectly professional tone, worth its weight in gold. I stood and looked out the window. A delivery truck pulled out of the lot, my company's logo shining on the side, a golden crown atop a silver platter. Pride swelled in my chest. Everything before me had been built by my own hands, every brick, every banquet, And to think I once felt small in my son's house. How foolish. A person's worth isn't measured by the label on their shoes, but by the path they've walked. The phone rang. Lucia was timing it perfectly. I counted silently 1, 2, 3 minutes, then picked up slowly. Royal Banquets, CEO speaking. Mom, finally. You picked up. Ethan's voice was tense, rushed, echoing slightly, as if he were hiding in his office bathroom. I've been calling for half an hour. Something's wrong with the bank. Madison's crying, her card got declined at the coffee shop. People looked at her like she was a criminal. Do you know anything about this? How unfortunate, I said calmly. Sometimes banking systems glitch or the magnetic strip wears out. No, Mom, she called the bank right there. They said the primary account holder canceled it. Did you do that? I paused a few seconds, letting the silence fill the space between us. Yes, Ethan, I did. But why? Why wouldn't you warn us first? Madison had to walk out in shame. That was cruel. Ethan, calm down, I said firmly. Remember our talk yesterday? You both said you wanted your own space, your independence, no interference from me. Fine. Independence is a full package. You can't be independent in your calendar and dependent in your wallet. You're misunderstanding, he stammered. We just meant maybe don't come over every Sunday, not cut us off financially. His naive reasoning almost made me laugh. Ethan, I've thought it through. Madison said it clearly. I don't want that old woman here. Words have weight, son, and actions have consequences. If they want independence, I'll respect that. The supplemental card was meant for family emergencies, not $10 lattes or luxury spas. I heard him swallow hard. Clearly, he'd never once checked the statements. But Mom, it's too sudden. Madison's furious. She says you're doing this out of spite. It's not spite. It's financial management. Speaking of which, the gardener, Mr. Anderson, won't be coming anymore. If you want to keep that lawn, you'll either pay for it yourselves or mow it yourselves. Oh, come on, Mom. I work all day. Madison can't mow the lawn. Well then, in a few weeks you'll have a lovely little forest growing out there. Your choice. Welcome to real life, Ethan. I hung up before he could protest. A wave of relief washed over me like shedding a heavy coat in the middle of summer. The whole morning passed peacefully. I reviewed the menu, approved budgets, and tasted the new chipotle sauce my head chef had just created. The spicy flavor awakened every sense. I felt alive, alert, and I had finally redrawn the boundaries. Around early afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message. Service plan change for account ending in 90B completed. Basic package now active. I smiled. The expensive premium plan with hundreds of international channels and ultra-fast internet had now become the basic plan, just enough for news and checking emails. I pictured Madison sitting in the living room trying to stream her favorite show, watching the endless spinning circle that never stopped loading. From coffee to the garden to entertainment, I was peeling away their layers of luxury one by one, like an onion, knowing each layer would sting a little more. At 4 p.m., my office door burst open. Ethan walked in, looking disheveled. His tie was crooked, hair a mess, sweat beading on his forehead. He had left work in the middle of the day, something he had never done before. We need to talk, he said, slamming the door shut and dropping heavily into the chair across from me. He looked like a scolded child. Good afternoon, son. Want some water? You look exhausted. No, Mom. I want to know what's going on. I came home for lunch. Madison's in a panic. The internet's down. The cleaning lady didn't show up. The house is a wreck after the weekend party. Then the car insurance email said the payment card was declined. I leaned back in my leather chair, fingers interlaced. I told you, Ethan. I'm reorganizing my finances, cutting unnecessary expenses. Unnecessary expenses? That's my life, Mom. Our life. Exactly, I said evenly. Your life. And you're an architect with a good income. It's time you learn to pay for your own life. Why should a retired woman like me pay for cleaning up your mess and your wife's Wi-Fi connection? I looked at him. He was rubbing his forehead in confusion. Because that's how it's always been. Because you wanted to. Because you're my mother. And you're supposed to help, he said softly. Help means giving someone a hand when they fall, Ethan. What I've been doing is carrying you on my back so your feet never touch the ground. I'm tired now. My back hurts and so does my heart. Ethan lowered his head, silent. The echo of Madison's shouting still hung between us. She shouldn't have yelled at you. I know. I already talked to her. Talked? Or did she yell at you too because you didn't take her side? I asked, striking the nerve. Ethan said nothing. Listen, Ethan, things are going to change and quickly. You have that dinner with your investors on Wednesday, right? His eyes widened, face draining of color. Oh God, the dinner. Mom, please tell me it's still happening. I promised my boss I'd handle everything. I told him you own the top catering company in the city, and we'd impress them. I need that dinner to get promoted. I remembered perfectly. 2 weeks ago, Ethan had practically ordered me to prepare a 5-course menu for 8 guests, lobster, prime beef, imported wine, all on Mom, like always. Ah yes, the dinner, I said, searching my desk drawer. I just reviewed the quote. I handed him the paper with my company's logo, each cost item clearly listed. Ethan's hands trembled as he read, stopping at the final number. $25,000, he whispered. Mom, you always cover it. This is for my career. Ethan, Royal Banquets is a business. I have employees, suppliers, electricity bills, warehouse rent. I can't keep giving my work away for free to people who no longer respect me. If you want to book the event, I need 50% down today, and the balance before the first course is served. I don't have $25,000, Ethan sighed. I just finished paying off Madison's SUV. My account's empty. Then have Madison cook, I said coldly. Or order pizza. I'm sure your investors will find that creative. Ethan looked at me as if I were a stranger, and in a way, I was. The soft-hearted mother was gone. That woman had died at Sunday lunch, murdered by ingratitude. Are you punishing me? Ethan asked in a trembling voice. How long is this going to last? This isn't punishment, I said firmly. It's a real-life lesson, and it'll last until you learn what you need to learn. You have until 6 p.m. to send the deposit. Otherwise, I'll assume you've chosen another option. I opened a drawer and pulled out a copy of the house lease. Oh, and one more thing. Since the internet's down, tell Madison to start cleaning and packing up the things she doesn't need. What? Ethan shot up, knocking his chair over. Are you throwing us out? That's my house. No, Ethan. That's my house. You're just living there. And I just reviewed the lease agreement. It has some very interesting clauses about respecting the property owner clauses we seem to have forgotten. I'm not evicting you today or tomorrow, but we'll be renegotiating the terms. Living rent-free in a mansion while yelling at the owner that she's not welcome, those two things can't coexist, not legally or morally. Ethan froze. For the first time, he realized his entire life was hanging by a thread I held, and Madison, with her arrogance, had just cut that thread herself. I have to go, he muttered, backing toward the door. I need to find a way to cover that dinner. Good luck, son. Close the door on your way out. Ethan left my office looking lost. I watched him through the glass as he walked away, dragging his feet, pulling out his phone, probably calling Madison. I stayed seated, surrounded by quiet. I wasn't happy, but I felt a deep sense of justice. They'd tried to erase me from their lives, yet now my presence lingered in every declined card, every messy room, every dark screen, every empty plate. My phone buzzed a voicemail from Madison. I pressed play. Her voice was tight, struggling to sound sweet. Mrs. Emily. There must be some misunderstanding. Ethan said you're upset. About Sunday I was just stressed. I didn't mean what I said. But please, don't do this to us. We need the card, and the dinner Wednesday is really important. Please, we're family. I listened twice. We're family. Funny how that phrase only appeared when they needed something. When I was excluded from their events, I was the old woman. When it was time to pay, suddenly I was family. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. I checked the clock 5 p.m. 1 hour before the bank closed and before the deposit deadline. I walked to the window, watching the sunset cast orange and lavender hues across the city. Tomorrow was Tuesday. I planned to visit the real estate office to reappraise the house on Maple Street. If they wanted to play masters of the world, they'd have to learn how much it costs to rent that world. This was no longer a Cold War. It was a fight for dignity, and I held every lever that mattered. Ethan and Madison were just beginning to realize they had awakened a giant who had once slept quietly in her kitchen, and that giant was hungry. As I packed up to leave the office, I thought about Wednesday's dinner. If they didn't pay, that lobster would sit on my own dining table, paired with a fine glass of white wine, my toast to solitude wisely managed, rather than fake family affection. The office door closed behind me with the solid click of a lock. Tomorrow, the lesson would continue. Wednesday night arrived, heavy with tension thick enough to overpower the scent of lobster bisque the chefs were plating. Ethan had wired the 50% deposit on Monday at exactly 5:55 p.m. I didn't ask where the money came from, but the Swiss watch he once flaunted had disappeared. Perhaps he'd sacrificed luxury for necessity. I was at their house not as the mother-in-law they tolerated, but as the CEO of royal banquets. I wore a black suit, an ivory silk blouse, and my name tag pinned to the lapel. Standing by the kitchen doorway, my posture was straight, professional. My team, 4 servers and 2 assistants, moved in perfect coordination. The house was chaos hidden under a glossy surface. 2 days without cleaning, and Madison hadn't lifted a finger. Dust clung to the baseboards, trash rolled under the chairs. I'd had to order an emergency cleanup of the dining area and bathroom not to help them, but to protect my company's reputation. Even if the food was flawless, a dirty venue could destroy my credibility. I added the cleaning fee to their final invoice, part of the balance they still owed. From my vantage point, I observed the guests, 3 businessmen from up north, deep voices, loud laughter, enjoying the red wine I had personally selected. Ethan laughed awkwardly, pouring refills with anxious hands. Madison tried to maintain her composure, dressed in an elegant deep blue gown, but her smile was fragile, like glass about to crack. Each time our eyes met, she looked away, half afraid, half angry. She knew I controlled everything, from the timing of the courses to the raising of the glasses, and she hated that dependence with every fiber of her being. Mrs. Emily, Marcus, my head server, approached quietly. Mrs. Madison wants to open the champagne now, before dinner, but you said to wait for dessert. Stick to the plan, I said firmly. That's French champagne, the special reserve. If they drink it now, they'll be too tipsy or tired by the time business starts. Just tell her it's a direct instruction from the director to ensure perfect pairing. Marcus nodded and went to relay the message. From across the room, Madison glared at me, her lips pressed white. Once, I would have given in, but not tonight. The real client was Ethan, and the goal was the contract, not his wife's tantrums. The dinner unfolded like a choreographed ballet. The truffle oil beef carpaccio appetizer drew praise. The lobster bisque made them close their eyes in delight. The main course filet mignon with morel mushroom sauce and young asparagus was cooked to perfection. I supervised every plate, ensuring presentation met fine dining standards. As the guests discussed profit margins, I stepped out to wash my hands. On the way back, I met Madison in the narrow hallway. She stood blocking my path, clearly waiting. We need to talk, she said sharply. The polite facade was gone. This was the same angry woman who had screamed at me on Sunday. Good evening, Madison, I said, my tone icy. If this is about the dinner, dessert will be served in 5 minutes. Don't pretend you're my employee, she hissed, trembling with rage. You're my mother-in-law. This is insane. You canceled my card, fired the cleaning lady, cut off the internet. I can't even watch a movie. What kind of twisted revenge is this? I looked at her with calm so steady it made her flinch. Slowly, I adjusted my name tag. This isn't revenge, Madison. It's financial restructuring. And I suggest you keep a professional tone when speaking to me. My staff can hear you, and it's inappropriate for a client to attack the director during an event. Ethan's going to kick you out, I swear, she said, eyes glistening with angry tears. We'll leave this place. I smiled, the kind of smile that silences a room. A small, almost invisible smile. We can discuss that later. For now, excuse me, I have a chocolate soufflé to taste before it's served. I stepped calmly past her and returned to the kitchen. My heart was beating faster, not from fear but from exhilaration. The ace was already in my briefcase. Dessert was the perfect finale. The investors were thrilled, applause rising from the dining room. Ethan entered, his face glowing with relief. "Mom, they loved it," he whispered excitedly, throwing his arms around me. "They're going to sign. They said everything was perfect. Thank you, really, thank you." I let him hold me, feeling his body relax. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy he once was, but then I remembered the missing watch, the blocked card, and his wife's screams. The motherly love in me was still there, but the indulgent mother was gone. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. Everything was handled professionally. Now go finish up with your guests. When they leave, I'll need you to sign the service report, and there's something important we need to discuss." Ethan hesitated, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but victory had softened him. "Sure, Mom. I'll be right back." An hour later, the house was quiet. The guests had left, taking with them the promise of a major deal for Ethan. My staff had cleaned up. The kitchen was spotless. The truck was loaded. I told them to go ahead, that I'd drive home myself. Alone in the kitchen, I sat at the table with my leather briefcase. I heard Ethan and Madison's footsteps approaching. They looked tired but smug, the air of triumph still hanging on them. Madison held a champagne glass, her words slightly slurred from the alcohol. "Well, Mrs. Emily," she said, lips curling into a smug smile, "the dinner was a success. I guess this is where you expect a thank you, so things can go back to normal, right? You had your little power show. Proved who's in charge. So, do we get our card back tomorrow? I need to get my nails done. Look at this." Ethan sat across from me, loosening his tie, looking like a man waiting for a white flag. "Mom, really, thank you. You saved us. I know I messed up, and Madison went too far, but it's over now, right? Can we just make peace?" I slowly opened my briefcase. The metallic click echoed through the silence. I took out 2 identical blue folders. "Yes, the dinner has been paid for," I said, placing both hands on the documents. "I'm glad the deal went well. You proved you can pull through when cornered. But no, we're not making peace. And no, Madison, the credit card will never be reactivated." Madison's smile vanished. Ethan sat up straight. "What do you mean, never, Mom?" "Business cards are for trusted employees and partners. You're neither. You're family people I love, but financially, you're a high-risk investment." "We don't have cash," Madison snapped. "Ethan earns, but we spend a lot. We need your help." "What you need," I replied evenly, "is to learn to live within your means. But that's not why I asked to meet." I slid the folders across the table. "These are new contracts." Ethan opened his hands shaking. "Contracts for what?" "Rental agreements," I said softly. "As you know, or chose to forget, this house legally belongs to me. You've been living here rent-free, temporarily. But since I was screamed at last Sunday that the old woman isn't welcome, I've decided to end that arrangement." Madison let out a bitter laugh. "You're evicting us? Your own son and daughter-in-law? What kind of person does that?" "No one's being evicted," I said calmly, pointing to the documents. "Read them. These are official leases. If you want to keep living in this house, in this gated community, with this garden, then do it as tenants." Ethan skimmed the paper and froze at the number. His face drained of color. $4,500 a month? "That's the market rate, son. I even gave you a 10% family discount. A house like this on Maple Street usually rents for $5,000. "You've lost your mind," Madison shouted, spilling champagne across the table. "We don't have $4,500 free every month. That's almost half of Ethan's salary." "Then adjust your budget," I replied evenly. "Fewer designer labels, Madison. Sell that gas-guzzling SUV and buy something smaller. Eat at home instead of restaurants. Simple math. Income minus expenses. If it's negative, cut expenses." I'm not signing this. Ethan slammed the contract onto the table. This is abuse. I'm your son. I've worked my whole life to make you proud, and now you're charging me rent like a stranger. I stood up. My shadow stretched across the table. You've worked for yourself, Ethan, and I am proud of you. But you didn't work for this house. This house was bought with 40 years of waking before dawn, with burned hands and sleepless nights, and you let your wife scream at me under its roof. I turned to Madison, whose face twisted in fear and fury as her glittering world began to collapse. Respect has no price, but a roof does. Then I continued, you have two options. 1. Sign the contract now, pay the deposit and the first month's rent by Friday. 2. You have 30 days to move out and find somewhere that suits your budget. The kitchen went still. Only the faint hum of the double-door refrigerator, which I had also bought, filled the air. Madison burst into tears. You can't do this. What will people say? What will my family think if we move into some tiny apartment? They'll say you're living within your means. That's far more respectable than living off the person you look down on. Ethan stared at the contract as if it were a death sentence. He knew there was no way out. Mom, please, we can go to therapy. We'll apologize 1,000 times. Just don't make us pay rent. Ethan, if you're already drowning in debt, I said slowly, then you need to hit bottom before you can climb out. If I keep paying for you, you'll only dig deeper. This isn't punishment, it's a lifeline to reality. I picked up my purse, leaving the files on the table. You have until noon Friday to decide. If I don't receive a signed contract and a transfer, I'll assume it's option 2, and my lawyer will start formal proceedings Monday morning. My heels clicked sharply on the marble floor as I walked away. At the door, I paused. Oh, Madison, I called out, loud enough for her to hear clearly. The basic internet plan I kept for you is good enough to search for rental listings. Use it wisely. I closed the door behind me. The night air was cool. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest heavy, yet somehow lighter. No mother wants to see her child in pain, but sometimes pain is the only cure for growth. I started the car and drove away from the house that was now nothing more than an investment property. In the rearview mirror, I saw the living room lights go out. They sat in the dark, and for the first time, they'd have to find their own light. That night, I slept soundly. The self-proclaimed masters of the world, I imagined, did not. And perhaps that was exactly what they needed. 3 months passed since the day I placed those 2 folders on the kitchen table. 3 months that felt like 3 years, yet they went by in a blur. The house on Maple Street, once the stage for sacrifice and ingratitude, was no longer theirs. That Friday morning, Ethan called me. His voice was hoarse and tired but strangely sincere. They had no money, couldn't pay rent, and chose to leave. The house was now rented to a Canadian couple working in diplomacy, punctual, reliable, and respectful of the property. Each time I received the rent notification, I felt both relieved and quietly wistful, not because I missed my son, but because the money no longer fueled illusions. It was now the return on a wise investment. Ethan and Madison moved out that weekend, renting a small moving truck and asking a few remaining friends to help. The friends from wine nights and parties vanished the moment the money stopped. They moved into a modest apartment in a peaceful suburb where neighbors greeted each other at the bakery and the garbage truck came by at 7 a.m. A real place. Today is Sunday again, but so different. I'm no longer in the kitchen preparing feasts for people who despised me. I was trimming roses in the garden when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it. It was Ethan. "Hi, Mom," he said. He looked different, thinner, his face no longer puffy from indulgence. He wore a simple shirt, one I could tell he had ironed himself. The cuffs still had faint creases. In his hand was a paper bag from the neighborhood bakery. "Hi, son," I said softly. "It's been a while." "Come in," I added, motioning for him to sit on the back porch. A gentle breeze swept through the yard. He placed the bag carefully on the table. "I brought pastries, not the fancy French kind, but people say this bakery makes good ones." "Good pastries are the ones shared, son." I smiled, pouring 2 cups of hot coffee. Ethan took a sip, exhaled, eyes fixed on the trees ahead. You were right, he said quietly. About everything. It's not about right or wrong, Ethan, I answered gently. It's about peace. I know. These last 3 months have been hell, Madison cried for 2 weeks straight. She broke 3 nails while packing and had to learn how to use the washing machine after ruining a pile of clothes mixing colors. It was chaos. I smiled, picturing Madison wrestling with bleach bottles. But you know what? Ethan continued, his eyes brightening. Last night I slept 8 full hours for the first time in years. My credit card debt is gone. We sold the SUV, paid off our major bills, and bought an old, fuel-efficient car. Life's tight, we count every dollar at the grocery store, but at least everything we eat is paid for by us. No one can use that to humiliate me again. The lesson had taken root. A bitter medicine, almost poisonous to pride, but it had cured the illness of dependency. And Madison? I asked. She's changing, though it's not easy. Guess what, Mom? She got a job. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. A job? Madison? Yes, at a bridal boutique. She's got a good eye for fashion, you always knew that. She works on commission, comes home late every night, feet swollen from standing all day. Last week she told me, Ethan, I had this awful customer today. She talked to me like I was her servant. Now I understand how your mom must have felt. You know, Mom, I choked up when she said that, not out of sadness but gratitude. Understanding only comes when you've lived the same feeling. I nodded, warmth spreading through me. I'm happy for you, truly. Work gives purpose, and honest exhaustion is the best sleeping pill. Ethan scratched his neck, hesitating like he used to when he was little and guilty of something. Madison asked me to invite you to dinner this Sunday. No lobster, just roasted chicken and potatoes. The apartment's small, no air conditioning, but we'd really like you to come. I looked at my son, the 35-year-old man finally growing up, and my heart swelled. I'll be there, Ethan, I said softly, and I'm sure that chicken will taste better than any fancy banquet. The change hadn't just come for my son. My own life and the lives of those at royal banquets had transformed too. When I cut off the endless stream of money fueling Madison's demands, I realized I suddenly had quite a surplus, $4,500 in rent, plus over $3,000 that used to cover their credit cards and services. A substantial sum. I could have saved it or traveled to Europe, but I'm not the kind to sit still and indulge. I thought of my staff that night at the dinner, how hard they worked while Madison demanded champagne. I thought of Lucia, my assistant, whose daughter was studying nursing but often couldn't afford textbooks. I thought of Marcus, my head server, who dreamed of owning a small house one day. And so, I created the Royal Fund. 1 month after Ethan moved out, I gathered all the employees in the central kitchen. They looked nervous, worried that the changes in my life might mean layoffs. I stood on a supply crate so everyone could see me. Good morning, everyone, I said. I have an announcement today. I noticed Marcus's shoulders tense slightly. Starting this month, the company will create a scholarship and housing support fund for employees who have worked here for more than 3 years. The fund will come from the rent of one of my properties. The money that was once wasted on luxury will now help your children study and help you live better. For a few seconds, the room was silent. Then it erupted in applause, mixed with Lucia's tearful sobs. She hugged me tightly. Mrs. Emily, you have no idea what this means, she said through tears. My daughter was about to quit school to get a job. Don't let her quit, Lucia. Let her learn. Education and hard work are the only 2 assets no one can ever take away. That moment was worth more than every fake, "I love you, Mom," I had ever heard. I realized the legacy I was leaving behind was no longer just a profitable company, but a thriving community. My employees no longer worked just for a paycheck, they worked with pride. The quality of our events rose higher than ever. The food now carried the flavor of gratitude. In my personal life, I found peace again. My afternoons reading were no longer interrupted by calls asking for money. I reconnected with old friends, the ones Madison used to mock as the gossiping old ladies. They turned out to be wise, warm, funny women who fully supported my choices. You did the right thing, Emily, my close friend Patricia said as we shared tea. Children need roots to ground them and wings to fly, not credit cards or debts. If you tie those wings down with money, they'll never learn to soar. She was right. I hadn't clipped their wings, I'd simply cut the golden chains that kept them bound. Sunday came, and I drove to the Westbrook neighborhood. Parking was tricky. I had to walk 2 blocks under the sun. I didn't mind. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, pausing before ringing the bell not because I was tired, but to steady myself. The simple wooden door opened. It was Madison. No makeup, hair tied back neatly, wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt. She had on the old apron I once gave her, the one she used to call outdated. Now it bore a red stain of tomato sauce. "Hello, Mrs. Emily," she said softly, her voice calm and sincere. In her eyes there was no defiance, only a touch of awkwardness and genuine respect. "Please come in. Welcome to our home." "Thank you, Madison. It smells wonderful," I said, stepping inside. "Roast chicken," she replied, moving aside. "Ethan's making the salad." The apartment was small, with the living room and dining area sharing one space. The furniture was a strange mix of leftover luxury pieces and cheap second-hand finds. But everything was spotless, clean, organized, cared for, not a speck of dust in the corners. The air carried the scent of home-cooked food, of effort and intention. Ethan walked out of the tiny kitchen, hands still wet, and gave me a loud kiss on the cheek. "You're here, Mom. Sit down, the chair's not Italian, but it's comfortable enough." We sat around a small pine table. The dishes didn't match, the glasses were thick and a little old, but everything shone with cleanliness. "I made the chicken using Grandma's recipe," Madison said as she served me a leg. "Well, I tried to. I looked it up online because I never asked you for it." I took a bite. The chicken was a little dry, a bit under-seasoned, but to me, it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. "It's wonderful, Madison. Perfectly golden skin." She smiled shyly, a real smile, like a child seeking approval. "Thank you, Mom. It was hard." I burned my hand. She showed me a small red mark on her wrist. "Kitchen burns are lessons, dear. My arms are full of them." During dinner, we didn't talk about Europe or designer brands. We talked about the downstairs neighbor who played country music every Saturday night. Madison shared stories from the bridal shop bridezillas, so demanding they were almost funny. Ethan talked about a new project at work, his first real responsibility, earned by arriving early and staying late. "Mrs. Emily," Madison said as we drank coffee, stirring her cup and avoiding my eyes. "When you canceled the cards and told us to leave the house, I hated you to the core. I thought you were cruel and selfish." Ethan tensed, ready to speak, but I placed my hand on his arm, signaling him to let her continue. Madison looked up. "Yesterday, when I got my first big commission for selling an expensive dress, I felt something I'd never felt before. That the money was mine, truly mine, and no one could use it to humiliate me. I bought this tablecloth with that money, and I felt proud. Now I understand. What you did was right. Painful, but a gift." My eyes blurred with tears. That was the moment I had waited for, not my transformation, but theirs. "It wasn't easy for me either, Madison," I said softly. "No mother wants to see her children struggle, but I'd rather see you fight for a while than live forever in weakness. You've built a home, not a big one, but your own. And that's worth more than any mansion someone else paid for." When dinner ended, I stood to help with the dishes, but they both protested. "You're our guest, Mom. Just sit and relax," Ethan said. I settled onto the couch, watching them move around the kitchen, bumping hips, laughing when a fork clattered, playfully arguing over who'd wash and who'd dry. They looked happy. A real couple, built on reality and effort, not on some picture-perfect fantasy posted online and funded by a mother-in-law's credit card. As I left, the sunset painted the old buildings gold. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Emily," Madison said, hugging me awkwardly but sincerely. "And I'm sorry. For everything, for what I said, for everything I did." "It's forgotten," I smiled. "But remember something. Madison, older women may have wrinkles, but their vision is long. We see things you haven't yet learned to notice." I descended the stairs slowly, feeling all 68 years in my legs but with a heart light as air. When I reached my car, I sat for a moment, looking up. Through the third-floor window, I could see the warm glow of their light and their silhouettes moving inside. They were living, truly living, and so was I. I had reclaimed my dignity, saved my son from dependency, and taught my daughter-in-law the value of work not with anger or lectures, but with the quiet strength of reality. I started the car. Tomorrow I had a meeting with the scholarship board, then lunch with friends. Life went on full, peaceful, and mine. As I drove down the sunlit street, I thought of the old saying, "Raise ravens, and they'll peck your eyes out." I smiled to myself. Sometimes, to keep them from pecking your eyes, you just have to stop feeding them and let them learn to hunt. I once believed a mother's love was the only thing strong enough to hold a family together, but I've come to realize love doesn't always mean protection. It often means stepping back so your children can learn to stand. Some lessons only life can teach. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is let them face their own challenges. Now, watching Ethan and Madison live simply but peacefully, I understand that love isn't in expensive gifts or lavish dinners. It's in the laughter shared over a sink of dishes, in the quiet pride of paying your own rent. It took me years to understand that sometimes one well-timed no is worth more than 1,000 yeses. And you, on your journey, have you ever had to let go so someone else could grow? Tell me your story in the comments below. If mine made you think or touched something in you, stay with me. There are more stories ahead, small lessons that can change an entire life.